All right. Well, we will just, as people come, I have my coworker Nathan helping do admits as they come. But I just want to say thank you all for joining us today for the interactive webinar, Making Great Falls the Remote Ready City. Our CEO, Brett, and I got to hear this webinar, which was put on in a partnership between Livability Media and Fourth Economy. Fourth Economy works a lot with talent attraction economics, where people are moving, why they're moving. And Livability Media, if you've ever heard me talk, you know I'm always talking about the Great Falls Livability magazine. We work with Livability Media to produce that magazine for our employers to use as a recruitment tool every year. So we saw this webinar and just knew we needed to share it further. We wanted this to be the spurring of a longer conversation around talent attraction, around specifically remote work when it comes to talent attraction. And so we have to start with asking the question, why are we even having this conversation? Well, as we all know, the pandemic has been making a lot of folks reconsider why they're living where they're living, why they're paying the rent that they're paying, especially if it doesn't allow for space, greenery, easy access to a backyard possibly. And we know that they're looking for a change in a lot of places. We've already seen it in some capacity here in Great Falls, but know that we're only at the very beginning of what we could see with remote work in Great Falls. So just so you know, this webinar or this conversation we are having today is being recorded. We're going to be able to, we'll send it back out. You can share it with colleagues, and I will send you the link to the full webinar that we're going to be working off of as well. So if you want to view the full webinar, we'll only be watching clips. So if you want to view the full webinar, I will be sending that out later. So with remote work, there's a number of surveys out right now related to this in and out migration that we're seeing from large cities into smaller or mid-sized cities like Great Falls, Montana, like Cascade County. It's an estimated around 14 to 23 million people planning to move as a result of their new remote work capabilities. Remote work largely is defined as someone who can work from anywhere, someone who can work remotely. So their job doesn't necessarily require them to be in the office every single day or every single week, or in many cases, every single month, which we could see as a big possibility here for Great Falls. People are moving out of larger cities looking for more affordable housing, looking for more access to green space, outdoor space where they can spread out, be comfortable and know that they're safe. So as people are seeking less expensive housing, we also know that the Bureau of Labor Statistics estimates that 29% of US workers, so 29% of US workers is approximately 42 million people, are able to work from home now. And all numbers indicate that number is going to keep growing, especially as we have learned from the past year about remote work capabilities for many, many companies. So with this webinar, with this conversation we are having today, we are hoping that this is the beginning of a much longer conversation about the remote readiness of Great Falls and how we can kind of make our community into a really welcoming, inclusive, and effective remote work community for people who are considering remote work. For any of you who do not know me, my name is Soren Chargois Ebbasi. I am the Talent Attraction Director at the Great Falls Development Authority. I have been with GFDA now for 14 or 15 months. I started last January, and when I started my work here, we were addressing the problem employers were having with bringing talent into Great Falls. So while remote work is just kind of a subset of this, we recognize remote workers as a huge potential in really industry. It's an industry across industries and potential for Great Falls to see money coming in and then thus being spent and growing our economy in a really positive way. So how this next 40, 50 minutes is going to lay out, we have chosen 4 great clips, 2 are 6 minutes, 2 are 3 minutes. And so we're going to watch a clip, and then and so while you're watching, be thinking about what they're saying, be thinking about what implications these can have in Great Falls or in Cascade County. And then we're going to have a short 5 to 7 minute conversation afterwards, kind of brainstorming what this could be, where we can go from here, essentially. So without further ado, we will just jump in. And so what we're going to hear with this first clip is 2 important indicators of remote readiness. Those 2 are essentially ability for the employers who are already here to have their employees work remotely, and then broadband infrastructure. So as you're listening, just be thinking about where Great Falls and Cascade County fall, and what pretty much what's next, or what are our pluses now. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I hope you enjoy this 6-minute clip. Can everyone see? Yep, great.
So hey everyone, I'm Chris Worley with Fourth Economy. Going to be talking about 2 key pieces of remote ready data and how they kind of integrate with a couple other data sets that Livability and Fourth Economy have put together over the years. So these 2 pieces of remote ready data that are so important are the remote workforce. Does your community have a presence of a remote workforce? For this, we look at workers who could work at home based off of a Bureau of Labor Statistics, job flexibilities, and work schedule data. This comes specifically from a question from a BLS survey that asks, as part of your main job, can you work at home? And we also know that remote work requires reliable high-speed internet. And to get an idea of broadband connectivity and internet speed for a typical user, we look at median download and upload speed data. This is from Google's measurement lab. And the data that we have here is from Q4 of 2020. We do know that before COVID-19, only about 3% of US workers teleworked on a regular basis. But recent surveys have pegged that as high as 25 or 33%. I've seen one that even said 40% at the height of the pandemic of US workers working remotely. And we know that COVID has forced employers to rethink their workers' ability to work from home. So when we look at the ability to work remotely, like I said, the Bureau of Labor Statistics completed a national survey. They estimate that around 29% of all US workers have the ability to work from home. This represents 42 million workers across the US. And in that survey, they found that industry and occupation mix determines the ability to work remotely. For instance, a worker in food and accommodation industry is much less likely to work remotely, while many in finance and insurance may have the ability to do so. Likewise, occupations like computer programmers or accountants are more likely to be able to work remotely than someone like a material mover or a fry cook. Looking at this map, areas that are shaded in light blue have lower concentrations of remote workers than those shaded in dark blue. We downscaled the BLS's national survey data and fit it to a model for each county in the US. And depending on industry and occupation mix of a community, the concentration of workers who are able to work remotely generally ranges from about 1 in 4 workers to 1 in 3 workers across the country. The next thing that we looked at was broadband infrastructure. Now, there are several ways to get at this, but probably the most dependable that we've seen is what a typical user experience is. So if you've ever taken one of those internet speed tests, what's my download and upload speed? This is where this data is coming from. It's from Google M Labs, and this is millions and millions of these internet speed test data each and every month. So we know that download speed is the most important factor for online work. Download speed affects things like web browsing and how well your connection receives video from other people. We know that's so important with Zoom calls. Upload speed affects how well your connection can send your video stream to others or upload files. So we really broke these down into 4 different categories. The bottommost category here is just too slow for remote work. Those in that yellow category meet the work from home minimum. Both the greens are great. The light green there meets the definition from FCC of high-speed internet. And the dark green there means that 3 to 4 people in a household could reliably share that internet connection, which we know is so important given either multiple spouses working from home at the same time, or folks who have kids who are trying to do their homework while at the same time that they're working. So again, across the country, we know that internet speed varies. This map shows those 4 categories that we just talked about. Broadband deployment is especially difficult in rural areas, and that's showcased here on the map. All places that show up in the top 10 from Livability and Fourth Economy on our top 10 remote ready list have either high-speed internet that meets the FCC definition or that next tier up, super high-speed internet. And when we look at all 3,000 counties in the US, we see that in that top tier, just over 1/3 of counties for a typical user have that high speed or super high speed connection. But almost 1/3 at the bottom, that 29% of counties, internet speed will not support remote work. So these are places that would need to make investments in broadband infrastructure to have an opportunity to recruit these remote workers that we're talking about.
All right, so initial reactions. So he talked about the presence of a remote workforce being necessary for a remote work economy, and then the broadband infrastructure being ready for a remote work economy. What are some initial reactions?
The one thing I'd say about Great Falls, and one point that speaker, I think, neglected is there are 2 components, in my opinion, to the broadband issue. One is speed and one is reliability. For residents in Great Falls that are within decent cable TV service areas, our speed is actually pretty good. I speed test all the time. I ran one while he was talking. I'm on Spectrum. I get 100 down, 10 up. We have very good speed. The problem is that Spectrum has reliability issues. They have not invested in the redundant routes needed to make sure that they can survive a fiber cut. So I view that as the big bugaboo for us within the core of Great Falls is speed is fine, reliability is poor. We then also have that larger issue of the outlying areas past the city limits, but not out to where the rural co-ops start providing service. So out on the edges where it's just CenturyLink and no DSL, that's where our biggest broadband issues are in Great Falls.
Soren, on TV, they had a story about the money that's going to come to Montana and putting in internet service, hopefully statewide. I don't know if part of that can be improving the quality of the internet where it currently is in some of the metropolitan areas. So I don't know enough about it, but I was excited to know that we are getting some funding and it's going to be earmarked for that. Obviously, it's a huge chunk of change to get internet service everywhere in Montana, but there may be a portion of that funding that can be put towards improving the quality of what we have already.
Absolutely. I agree with that. It is exciting that that's a possible opportunity. And that would mean a lot for this exact conversation we're having, right? With remote work and making Great Falls a remote ready community. Any other thoughts? How do you think, community members in Great Falls view on two sides? One, Great Falls as a remote worker community, having remote workers come in and work remotely from here. And then on the other side, employers who are already here, allowing their employees to work more remotely.
So I've heard some people express concern about people moving here for jobs that are somewhere else, where they'll be earning income, they'll be spending money in our community, which is wonderful. But will the businesses be paying into our tax base, et cetera, versus having the company be here and everything is more state-based, or, where all of the taxes, not only the income taxes, but then, the business taxes, et cetera. So I think there's concern both ways. And but I think we have to tell that message that, okay, maybe Susan Wolf moved into Great Falls, but she's still working for a company out in Oregon. I'm still here. I'm using that salary to pay for my house, to pay my property taxes, to spend money in the restaurants and in our shops. So I think we have to be careful. People don't want to point fingers and say, but that's not going to help us, because it will help us.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. That's a very good point, and something to keep top of mind as we move forward with these efforts.
Well, and I agree that it's pretty hard to promote a remote work environment, but then try to control the company which offers remote work. I would think is Great Falls. For me at least, it wouldn't matter where the company was located, as long as they're here and they're working, they're using the infrastructure, and to Susan's point, paying the requisite taxes that are here. I think we would all benefit from that. And to touch on Tim's comments earlier about reliability for broadband. So during the initial lockdown phase, where we send everyone home to work remotely, we were fortunate in the fact that our platforms were set up so that everybody could do so. But we did have some challenges, to his exact point, on some reliability in some of the outlying areas. And so that is an absolute concern, because our business and sorry, Roy Alexander, business development manager with VisionNet, and so our business necessitates that our employees can access platforms, and if they can't, it's just impossible for us to do the work that we do.
Absolutely.
I think, if I could add one other thing, on the cultural side of the issue of remote workers, one thing that I see a lot on social media is Great Falls is an aging community. We skew much older, and that entails a lot of people that do not necessarily want to see change. So the common comment is, oh, you people want to move here and then make Great Falls be just like where you moved away from. And so we've got some cultural hurdles and some marketing hurdles around that issue of letting, as a community, we have to sort of decide, do we want to have newcomers come into the community? That is certainly a divided issue.
Yeah, Tim, you're absolutely right. Even when I was applying for my job to come here 9 years ago, I talked with my brother, who had lived here for 32 years, excuse me, before going back to our family ranch. And he said, well, it's a very conservative town. And at that time, politically, it was probably still purple. And he said, and I don't mean politics. He said, it's a community that does not want to change. And that is a hurdle that we have to think about, for sure. And so I have a question too, Roy. You were talking about all of your people going back, you're working from home during COVID. As far as I know, Centene Corporation is still, everybody's working remotely. I don't think anyone's over there. That's a large number of people. And I don't know what kind of experience they've had. Does anybody else know that? I mean, that's a huge number.
So I can weigh in here a little bit. Not that I work for Centene, but I own and operate a computer repair and consulting business here in town, as well as being over our IT department at Easter Goodwill. I've supported a lot of people who had to transition very quickly to work from home for Centene. And for the most part, most of them are on Spectrum. Nobody's really on DSL. And for those people who were in those outlying areas that were maybe on something else, Starlink is starting to come in and doing demos with their satellite feed. And then a lot of people who just felt like they needed that redundancy went and got 4G hotspots as well. So I haven't run into a lot of people who have had any kind of problem where they just were not able to continue work.
Thank you. That's a great point. And thank you for great conversation. We're gonna move on to the next clip because again, we want to cover everything we have planned today, but this is exactly the kind of conversation that I'm glad to hear and great points being brought up across the board. So this next clip, you guys, they mentioned in the last clip about Livability's Fourth Economy's remote ready top 10 list. And so we're going to hear the recipe for making a remote ready city. And you're going to kind of hear some of what we've already been talking about, the welcoming, the invitation, if not in this one, and in one, a couple near the end, in a clip near the end. So let's be thinking about what are we currently doing super well in Great Falls, and then what can we implement immediately and in the long run to make it better, to be even better, because that is our goal all the time, onward and upward. So let's think about that while we watch this next clip. And this is a short one, only 3 minutes.
So let's take a look at what we did with combining this remote ready data with Fourth Economy Community Index and Livability Top 100 data. So like Rich said, the Fourth Economy Community Index incorporates 20 different indicators across the areas of investment, talent, sustainability, place, and diversity. And while we know that there is no single recipe for economic success, we also know that these 5 areas are critical ingredients in vibrant and equitable communities everywhere. The Livability Top 100 data is geared toward talent attraction and relocation efforts. Winona will talk about this more, but Livability bases their score on 8 categories, totaling 40 indicators, with weighting based on survey responses from 1,000 millennials about the factors that are most important to them when deciding where to live. And of course, we just talked about the remote ready data. So who makes the list? All the top 10 have high concentrations of remote workers, high-speed internet access, and also score well across quality of place metrics. For the remote workforce, nearly 3 in 10 workers are able to work remotely. An estimated, in these 10 studies, an estimated 451,000 out of 1.5 million workers are able to work remotely. Like I said, all these places meet or exceed the FCC's definition for high-speed internet. And when we looked at the Fourth Economy Community Index and the livability indicators, these places are places that score high in quality of place, like cost of living, amount of home ownership, presence of cultural amenities, and they're also talent magnets. We know that these places have attracted those with high degrees of educational attainment, high wages, and high rates of resident retention. So to unveil the top 10, this list of top 10 really separated themselves from other places across the country because they appeared both in the top 10 lists of the Fourth Economy Community Index and the Livability Top 100. So Fourth Economy, our community index, has 3 top 10 lists based off of county size, so small, mid-size, and large places. Places that score highly in the community index are those that are vibrant and equitable. Livability has a top 100 list that focuses on the factors that are most important to millennials when deciding where to live. So we cross-reference these lists. these top 10 differentiated themselves by performing well on both those lists, as well as in broadband access, local jobs that can be done at home, affordability, a robust regional economy, and quality of life factors. So
all right, so that top 10 list is one of the newer ones that they do. We know Livability puts out a top 100 list every year, and actually in 2019, Great Falls, Montana ranked number 88, I believe, on that list, or somewhere around there. Which is awesome, and we're working to get back on it. We're still waiting to see what they unveil in April. So that said, so according to Chris at Fourth Economy, their kind of recipe for this top 10 list is between having an available remote workforce, having high-speed internet, plus quality of place. I think, as we've already discussed, Great Falls specifically, because we are in the, a more metropolitan area, and have that higher speed internet, even though without the reliability, which again, hopefully we get investment in, that we are doing well in some of these. So what, from your initial reactions, where are we succeeding here already?
Soren, this is Sheila Rice, and I think where we're succeeding is the cost of living and home ownership. Although, as Brad often says, we really need a production builder to come in here and build 100 new houses a year. I think with the possibility of infrastructure funding coming through the new COVID relief called the ARPA funds, that there could be a possibility of buying down the cost of lots using infrastructure money to extend sewer and water. Just a little anecdote: when NeighborWorks Great Falls developed 21 lots in Black Eagle, the cost of the land was 15% of the finished lot. So even if you're given land, it's still $35,000 per lot for an average lot. For a small lot. For something bigger, it's going to be much more than that. So that goes directly into the cost of the house. The second thing, I think I want to talk about amenities for a minute, because what I see is that Great Falls doesn't have that we're in the mountains allure of some of the mountain cities. But we really need to emphasize how many fabulous day trips there are right out of Great Falls. You can go to Glacier in a day and take a good hike and make it home by dark in the summertime. You can go to the Rocky Mountain front. You can go to the river. You can go to the little belts, the big belts. And I think that we haven't emphasized enough that Great Falls is in the heart. In every direction, there's great things to do related to the outdoors and the mountains, as well as our own River's Edge Trail, of course. So those are the things I'd emphasize. Is we don't want to say we're not in the mountains. We want to say we're close to everything.
Absolutely. And if you all are familiar, and I know you are, Sheila, but Great Falls Tourism's, and we work very, very closely with Great Falls Tourism here at the Great Falls Development Authority, but their sort of motto for Great Falls is the base camp, Montana's base camp for art and adventure. So we're really, with that language, trying to emphasize that proximity we have to those locations around Great Falls. I would also take this opportunity to encourage everyone here, and then your friends and family, to post positively, when you are on Facebook or on Instagram or whatever social medias you choose or do not choose to use. Be talking positively about Great Falls. Share that day trip you go on. Use the hashtag Living Great Falls if that's something that you would like to do. So I just wanted to say that, because talking positively about our community is a huge it will change slowly the perception of our community, which I think I've already heard it today, that's something that that needs to be done.
And that I would just add to that for that regional focus as well, because Great Falls, these rural communities are feeder communities. And so, for example, I have my Great Falls, but I live in Shoto. I was able to work remotely, no problem, because Three Rivers has made that huge infrastructure investment. I mean, they have broadband clear up into the mountains now for those mountain communities. So when we do take that regional approach, not only to play, but you can also regionally work because there have been the broadband investments in the rural areas.
Thank you. That's a great point. So on the, oh yeah, was someone going to say something? Maybe not. So on the flip side, so we are doing great in some capacities. Where do you think there's a gap, or where could we improve when it comes to that remote workforce? Plus, we already again have talked about the broadband, but quality of place as well. How can we step up in a way? What are some of your thoughts there?
I'd love to jump in here. So I'm Ryan Todd, and I am a remote worker. I work for ATG in Missoula, and I'm here in Great Falls because my husband's in the Guard. So I've worked remotely for 4 years, and we have jumped around from Oklahoma and Arkansas. And then basically I came to this meeting a little bit selfishly just because there's one specific thing that I do every time we move, and it's Google, is there co-working places in that community? And the only one that actually had it was Arkansas. And so I utilized it once, and it was really cool because I was able to just drop in for a day when I had like a disruption at my house. I know I was at one of the meetings that you guys had, and I think that it was announced that there might be a co-working business opening up soon. But one other suggestion that I had was, even if there isn't a specific business dedicated to it, as someone who's new to the community, it's hard to even know if there are like good quiet spaces to work outside of the home. So for example, this summer, we had our electrical done. So for about 3 weeks, we were with spotty internet and then spotty power. And so I was kind of jumping around different coffee shops trying to figure it out, but there were certain use cases. I have to take meetings sometimes where I need absolute privacy in like a specific room. So if there was some sort of publication of places that offer those types of amenities, that would be super helpful.
Thank you for saying that, Ryan. I am really, we recognize that there is a gap there. We don't have, well, and Heather just sent something, and I have into the chat if you guys want to look at it, but we do know that there is a gap with co-working spaces here. And, in a big capacity, as you probably recognize, there's not many places you can go and then have a private room if you need to make a phone call. If you are in a cafe, you're just making the phone call from a cafe. I had a very failed Zoom meeting 2 weeks ago trying to do one from a cafe, and it was way louder than I was expecting it to be. I would like to say as some of you might know, we released the liveingreatfalls.com website last June. We are about to release an update of that in the coming weeks. There will be a dedicated remote worker page there. So we're hoping to link, great, here's where to go for this. Here's if you're looking for this sort of vibe, you can go to, another place. But that is something that we recognize and is a priority for the community. Tim, is your hand raised?
It is one different area that I'd like to talk about in terms of amenities is we have difficulty bringing high quality traveling musical acts into Great Falls. 2 suggestions or ideas I have about that is, one thing that I have been actually personally involved and aware of in trying to promote some things is that the Mansfield Center is too expensive, and the city needs to figure out how it wants to operate the Mansfield. My personal position would be we should operate it at a huge loss. It should be a hugely subsidized, frictionless thing, that if we can get a traveling act, because part of the problems with getting acts into Montana is touring acts travel from Seattle to Chicago. And so it's easy for them to bypass Great Falls because the East-West Interstate doesn't come here. So we have to, in every other way, make it as frictionless as possible. So the Civic Center should be cheap and very easy for acts to book into. And the other idea that I've had is there's been, over the last few years, there's been some performance things done on the hill at Giant Springs. And I think that, I don't know, I don't know how the receptive state parks would be to it, but I think the development of more sort of amphitheater style infrastructure at Giant Springs. One of the issues that they have is parking and having people go across the road. That's a thing. They need some other infrastructure in order to more regularly hold concerts on the hill there at Giant Springs. But I think we miss a huge opportunity by not making that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan, do you have something? And then we'll move on to the next clip.
I do. I just want to talk about the co-working space. Even though I haven't had a need for one, there's one down in Helena. It's called Sidecar. And I met him when we had an event, and I was just so excited. And the one that's being built on Central, it's like between 7th and 8th on the north side of Central. It's where the bookstore used to be, and there was a music store. And boy, they're busy and they're working. You can see the steel beams going in or whatever. So we'll, I think, have a really nice co-working space fairly soon. So that's, I think, very exciting.
I just want to quickly add before you go on to the next topic that I think it would be beneficial if once you had a few people that were remote workers like Ryan, if there was like a group, sort of like there's the Downtown Business Association, if you had a remote workers group, because if they were to have a coffee or a Zoom meeting once a month, they can share the issues and problems and let people know this is the place that you can go and have a meeting, or if your internet's down, this is a great place to go, because they're in that world and living it every day. And it's kind of a support group. And it also gives them a sense of community, because when you're working by yourself, you don't get out in the community that often. And so, maybe once in a while they could have a picnic or something together. But I think it's really important that they have that peer support. And so if an organization could be established, and even if you, maybe Lauren, set up 5 or 10 people, that are working remotely, or maybe some of the people from Centene, and just have a, like just an open session just to meet everybody in a Zoom, and then, let them take it from there. Maybe they can, have somebody coordinate each month or something. But I do think it's important that they have that community contact with other people in the community that are working similarly than they are, and they'll get a lot of information that way.
Absolutely. I think that's a great idea. I jotted it down. I've been jotting down all these great ideas. But moving forward, that is something we will definitely think about. And someone can lead it. That would be fun. All right, so let's move on to this next one. It's another little bit longer of a clip and we're going to be hearing from Winona DeMeo Ediger, who's the editor-in-chief of Livability Media. So we actually work pretty closely in the production of the Great Falls Livability magazine. She makes sure it's digital for us to share. And so we're going to be hearing about kind of themes from the 2020 data that they collected as they did this big focus on remote workers. What do remote workers want? What are they looking for? And then from the city leaders, we're going to hear some data from the city leaders of these communities that did rank in the top 10. What are the qualities of the leaders that allowed their city to make it onto this list, essentially? So we will listen to that now.
Anyone who's looking to relocate. So I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of tying in the data that Chris talked about, the data that from Livability survey and from our definitions of livability, and then how this all ties into our top 10 remote ready cities list, and kind of just themes that are coming up across the board when we're talking about what remote workers want and what makes a city remote ready. First and foremost, affordability is key. Remote workers, they're looking for a different pace of life. They're looking to, bring their job somewhere where they can get just more for their money. Like I said, get creative in how you define affordability as a marketer, as an economic developer, because residents are creative in how they define affordability. The other theme that is really interesting to me is just this idea of access, right? It's people want access to other cities to the rest of the country to kind of a freedom of movement. They want access to outdoor recreation. They also want access to city leadership and in terms of being able to access people who are making decisions and kind of shaping the future of their city. They want access to leadership positions. They want a seat at the table. They also really want access to a really full, rich, vibrant life. And they don't want to compromise on that. And that's really cool in terms of that they're able to make these moves and these cities are able to offer them something different that way. They're also craving, obviously, nature and open spaces is a huge selling point, and a lot of different variations, by the way. You know, small parks, big parks, national parks, state parks, backyards, all kinds of stuff that way. And then, like we touched on, this idea of local opportunities and growth, they want a place that's going to be a smart move for them career-wise, and they're not looking at themselves as sort of a little career island. They want to move somewhere that they sense that energy and opportunity and growth and connection and networking, all of that is very important to them. And next, I want to talk about, I have to say this picture kind of cracks me up because this guy is like a remote working icon. I don't know if he's wearing pants or not, and who among us? But I also talked to city leaders from the top 10 cities in the process of putting together this list, and just wanted to have conversations with them about, you know, like why, really getting down into the why. Why is your city so remote ready? Why is it so appealing to remote workers? What have you been doing behind the scenes to leverage that? And some themes arose from these conversations as well that I wanted to share with you today. The first one is these city leaders are future focused. None of them were kind of just leaning back and wanting to either maintain momentum or do what everyone else is doing. They're all looking to innovate. They're looking to push boundaries. They're looking to do something completely different and new, and you know, invest in infrastructure in new ways, talk about culture and build culture in new ways. And they're also communicating that future-focused mentality to prospective residents, and that's key. They're also being authentic about who they are. And by that, I mean, I think in terms of, you know, in the economic development and place marketing world, a lot of us fall into this trap of saying, you know, we have something for everyone here. And you might, but you actually probably don't. And that is 100% fine. And if you can be honest about that, about who you are, about what you have to offer that no one else has to offer, and also about your shortcomings and about your blind spots and about the things you're working on, that is so appealing to, especially, as we all know, millennials are obsessed with authenticity. And a lot of remote workers are millennials. So if you can really be authentic about, you know, your good parts, your bad parts, the places you fall short, that's actually a selling point. These places are also speaking directly to remote workers. They are, you know, saying, if you are working remotely and you can live anywhere, we want you to live here, and here's why. There's no one benefits from kind of trying to be vague about who you want and why you're a good place. Really speak to, if you want remote workers in your city, speak to them on your social media, at events, and hashtags. Really be very clear with them that you're excited about them and what you have to offer. And then finally, these cities all just have this great culture of welcoming and inclusiveness. They really genuinely want new residents, and they want to give them a seat at the table. And they want to include them in decisions and really say, like, we're growing, we want you to come grow with us, and we want you to help us grow in a thoughtful and, you know, unique way. And that's really resonating with remote workers.
So hold your thoughts for one moment. We're going to watch one more short 3-minute clip for the sake of time, and then we'll just do a kind of combined discussion session. We're going to be hearing from Kenny, who I believe is the president of, I think it's called Columbus One. Columbus, Idaho was Columbus was the highest ranking in that remote work list that Livability and Fourth Economy put out. So we're going to hear from him about, you know, how they're doing, what they're doing, how they're doing it. So I'm going to, and this is just another short 3-minute clip.
we maybe bring in a couple audience questions. Kenny, when we were talking, and I was just kind of asking you about sort of the paradigm of the leadership in Columbus and how you look at growth and you know, kind of incorporating new residents. I just loved what you had to say about Columbus wants you here, and we want to hear your voice, and we want your opinions, and we don't care where you're from or what your background is. There's clearly a very collaborative and inclusive culture there. Could you speak a little bit about how important that is, or maybe any tips you have to kind of foster that in other places that are looking to foster that?
Well, first of all, I do think that you get fortunate with the home of Ohio State University. It's an urban university that sits in the middle of the city with some 65,000 students on a regular basis that are on campus in the middle of the city, and all the worldwide faculty that live there as well. That breeds a certain amount of openness because of the people that it constantly brings to our community from around the world, and the ideas that they bring to how to make the community better and stuff. So that's a little bit in our DNA. And then we're blessed to have 17 Fortune 1000 companies sort of surrounding all of that are, you know, from the fashion industry. This is the headquarters of Abercrombie and L Brands and DSW Shoes and all these companies from the fashion industry. And so there's a really interesting mix of people here. So it's become part of our culture. What we tried to do intentionally to foster that even further is to organize that. You know, to have our business community, our academic community highly organized and aligned around what we have stated as our vision, which is to be the most prosperous place in the country. We certainly want to grow. We think that's a precursor to a lot of good things, but we want to close gaps at the same time. And we saw those laid bare, as all of us, as we went through the course of the pandemic, the wealth and health and education gaps that became even more important. The gaps in broadband, even in a place like Columbus that are, you know, has terrific access, but not everywhere, and it isn't affordable for everyone. We get really excited about solving those problems as a community. And again, it's towards a vision, it's toward a greater purpose that we talk a lot about. We try to open our meetings with it. We try to keep it on the front page. Whether they're good things or bad things, I think that gives people a reason to say we're here to make it better. And we think it's pretty great right now. And it keeps everybody moving forward and like you said, future oriented.
So as Winona was talking, she kind of discussed the four themes that she saw in her data: affordability, access to other cities, access to green spaces, access to city leaders and leadership positions, nature and open spaces, and then local opportunities for growth. And then she said the data that she was hearing from city leaders was that they were future focused, authentic about who they are. And I think Great Falls does do a great job at authenticity. I'm very proud of living here for that reason. Speaking directly to remote workers and just anyone, talent in general, considering relocation, and being welcoming and inviting. So I guess, so my question then is, what does a future focused community look like? And then where are we doing a great job at that as Great Falls? And then where might we do a little better?
I'd like to comment on a couple things that had both of the speakers kind of hit on. What was the ability to enjoy outside spaces and things like that. And I'll somewhat selfishly tie that back into a couple projects that we're involved with. But a couple municipalities in Oregon recognized the need, and this was mainly driven by their student body. They recognized the need for the availability of internet access to people that might not have reliable internet access or not where they wanted it. So the end result was a city project, well, two cities actually, but they came together to get it done, for a municipal Wi-Fi network in their downtown areas, as well as school parking lots and parks and things like that. Both for kids to be able to go and get online to do their homework and things like that, because at that point they weren't going to school in person. But also for the residents of those two cities to be able to enjoy the outside spaces. And tying it back to what Tim said, so they had a wonderful little amphitheater, and that was a focus of theirs, is to make sure that there was Wi-Fi access at that amphitheater. So when people went to see concerts and things like that, that they'd be able to get online on a reliable basis. And so I don't think that would certainly be a harmful thing for the city of Great Falls to look at in the downtown areas, or just pick a few spots. It doesn't have to be extensive. It doesn't have to be enormously expensive. It just has to be the effort. And I think that, certainly I could lend our expertise to help that move along, or not, just depending on what the needs would be. But it is proven, here in the early phases, to be a successful project.
Absolutely. Thank you. Any other thoughts?
Soren, I know that they just produced a welcoming video for military families. And so maybe you could get this community leaders, some of the people to talk about the outdoor, maybe you can get one of the organizations that does, hiking and that sort of thing, and get somebody from each of those, or maybe, and do a welcoming video for people that are considering here for remote. It would be a good marketing tool.
We actually absolutely agree, and have these videos in production. So in the coming months, well, really the first one's being released possibly as soon as next week, we are producing a series of videos called Ask an Expert. So these Ask an Expert videos will feature an expert from somewhere in the community, across a variety of industries, sectors, and just general interest spots. So we have a realtor talking about real estate options in Great Falls. We'll have somebody talking about the schools, public and private. Someone who homeschools will have ask an expert about the cocktail scene, about snowshoeing in the winter, skiing in the winter, motorsports in the summer. So we'll have an Ask an Expert video for all of these, and it will live on YouTube and then all our social media channels as well. So once those start coming out, feel free, please share those with people, let them know that they exist. They'll also live on our website as well, liveingreatfalls.com. So we are absolutely on the same page with that, and recognize that they'll be short, 1 minute, 1.5 minute videos, kind of doing a little introduction for people who are considering relocation. Dr. Wolf, you have your hand up.
Thanks. One of the things we've talked about in several meetings is how we really do have the Military Affairs Committee, and how we as a community do try to reach out to the new people coming into town and welcome them and tell them about it. But we talked about, we don't have a welcome wagon anymore for new residents coming into town, where how do they find out about all the wonderful things going on here? How can they connect if they're looking for a group of people in their 30s, or a group of people with young children, or more people like me, is where do the old people hang out? And it's just like, what are those things that we can really help people feel welcome and learn about our community? We often hear of trailing spouses coming here, so the spouse is working and the trailing spouse is sitting at home feeling pretty isolated. And if the spouse isn't happy, the worker won't be happy and they'll leave. So I think that trailing spouse and welcoming everybody is really going to be critical.
Absolutely. I think so. Corey and Melissa, you both have your hands up. I think Corey, you did first, and then we'll hear what you have to say, Melissa.
I actually just wanted to chime in a little bit with a personal perspective, because we moved here to work, and I'm kind of in a hybrid situation with my job right now, in December. So Great Falls as a whole has been awesome. And I think a lot of those points are ticked off. You have great access to nature. I think we spend more time outdoors here than we have in years. So it's a wonderful, wonderful layout for nature. Broadband is not as bad as in some of the places I've ever been. To be honest, it is more than easy enough to work from home here. So a lot of really great things. I think one of the only aspects sometimes, and I know it was mentioned earlier, it's about 50-50 about whether or not people want you here when you're new. My first month driving around with a license plate that was not from Montana drew some comments. Not all of them bad, but some of them not the most friendly. So it's one of those things where the message probably needs to be, and I have no issues with it personally because I can make friends with anybody for the most part. Let's sit down and talk. But I could see it driving some people, especially probably more introverted people, away as something that, I just don't want to deal with it. I can work anywhere. I don't want to deal with this. So that might be something to think about as well. But I think overall, and I've been lucky enough throughout my career to work in 3 of those cities that are on the top 10 there. And I would pick here for the most part. Honestly, it's a great town. So kind of that's a thought process to have as well, as you have a great town. You can feel the authenticity. There may be little things. The co-working space I thought was a great point. Like I thought that would be great. So there's little things like that. But overall, I think it's a great place to be a remote/hybrid worker.
Thank you for sharing your perspective. That is really good and insightful, and I think speaks to an absolute truth that there is a split. There are people, we are authentic and we want growth and we want new people here, but then those few comments here or there, and I think just generally having this conversation with other people. So don't let this conversation end here. Everyone, bring it out, have the conversation so we can create that inclusive community. Melissa, did you still have a comment?
Yes, I just wanted to speak a little bit about our perspective, which maybe is another marketing angle that we're not looking at. My husband started working remotely in 2014 and we were still in the Bay Area. I'm a Montana native and I wanted to come home, and remote work helped us come home. So I think that's an area too that we're not necessarily looking at as a slightly older demographic, maybe mid-career to late career, who are really established in their jobs and have high salaries and are able to bring them to California. Able to bring them from where they were to Montana, because a lot of millennials are starting out maybe not at the highest incomes too. So we have to look at affordable housing and things like that. So I really think that maybe come home to Montana, come back home. And, we came home not only because I was desperate to, live in Montana again, but also to take care of our aging parents. And I know a lot of people here who have moved back to Great Falls even during COVID, was to help their parents during COVID and as their parents aged.
Absolutely. Heather?
Thank you. I agree with that last on the parent thing. We're seeing that even in the rural areas as well, is mid-career people moving closer to family. I'm with Family Connection, so I always like to bring up the options of having readily available childcare. That's important for me, both as a commuting person and as a remote worker. I can't have my daughter at home and have some clear thoughts some days. And then also offering high quality summer programming. We'll be traveling actually to other communities this summer, because while Great Falls does have some summer programming, the level of quality is lower. It's not as engaging or as enriching. So that would be something I would love to encourage. So parents can still have childcare options, but the kids are doing some really fun things and enriching things. And then the third thing I'd say is to network the libraries in. Many of them have been in reduced capacity over COVID, but as we open back up, I know many of them are re-envisioning what a library is as a town green, as a gathering space. And maybe some of that co-working part can be worked into spaces that already exist.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. And I think our library is great and it's underused. I go there all the time to work. I'm still, here at GFDA, we're still working remotely for the most part. We haven't had an in-person meeting in the office in a very long time. So I have used the library at times, also lots of cafes, as I'm sure Ryan and some of you other individuals can attest to. Tara?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate being able to sort of eavesdrop. I got the notice, but I don't live in Great Falls. I work for Montana State University Extension. I'm the community development program leader for Montana. And I just want to share a couple of things that we're working on that are super relevant to this conversation. First of all, we just decided to become an affiliate of the Utah State University Extension's remote work certification program. So we are going to be launching that probably in May. So it's a certificate, it's a 4-week course where people can learn the skills to be a remote worker. So it can be professional development for people that are already working remote. It can be a class that people learn how to be a remote worker and will help you find jobs in that regard. And it also can be a professional development for a business owner if they want to move their business more into the online space. So that we're literally just last week. So we're working on that. So watch for more on that to come. This whole idea of welcoming is, so I really specialize in, I'm really focusing on rural leadership development and rural vitality. And we just had a program in the fall called Reimagining Rural. And we had a speaker that really kind of shined a light on how unwelcoming we are in rural places. It's not just Montana. And most people consider even Great Falls rural, even though it's metro and Montana speak, but it's really a problem. And people will not stay if they're not welcomed in. And we recently just 2 weeks ago, we had a little focus group on Zoom. We had newcomers from all over the state talk about their experience, because we're within Extension, we're doing a video series. I came away terribly sad. Each one of those people had experiences like Corey had talked about, where they had been told, go home, we don't need you, we're full. It was really awful. One was living in Great Falls, and they were not as upbeat as Corey. They felt not really welcome. So I do think that is a huge challenge. You can have all the other great things that cost money, but if you don't have a welcoming place, people will leave. If they don't have a connection, they're going to leave. Okay. So one last thing, so this newcomer thing is really super interesting because people are coming into rural places, and we're going to do a newcomer survey in surveying the people that have moved to Montana in the last 5 years to find out how they picked their place, what they like about it, why they moved, all those sorts of things. How many people are coming back, like Melissa, or how many people are new to the place. So we're going to be launching that. That's a mail survey, and that's going to be coming out probably in the next month. So anyways, we have a lot going on. Newcomers are super interesting, at least to me and my work that I'm doing right now. So thanks.
Well, did you say, Tara, that the surveys will be coming out in the next month, or the results?
The survey. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to meet.
I'm very interested in that.
Yeah, I know. Oh my gosh. I cannot wait. I'm planning next fall to just be going in person to all these great conferences and hopefully sharing the results, because we're just super excited, because there's a lot of research in this area on newcomers from the Midwest, but we think that Montana is probably a little bit different. So it'll be really interesting to find out how different that is. So thank you for letting me share some of the fun things that we're doing. It's super relevant to this conversation, and it's really great to hear what you guys are talking about. Thank you for sharing. I think across the board, great conversation. I think a great point that I heard, from the very beginning through to this very moment was the idea of, we do have the authenticity. Great Falls is authentic, but how far can we go with that if there are still people making the negative or rude comments to people, which I've heard. We see the bumper stickers. I've seen business owners make comments like this. So I think it does start with each and every one of us to start having that more inclusive, just language in general. And maybe that's the next conversation. If, we had this remote work conversation, and maybe the next one is, maybe Tara will present her survey data, and we can talk about what it's going to take to make Great Falls that for people who are coming in, make Great Falls that inclusive and welcoming place across the board. Veronica?
You know, you're putting together some wonderful marketing in order to attract people, but I think you need to have something like Corey can be your spokesperson for a person who's moved here. But maybe you should do a separate small marketing campaign just to the people of Great Falls who do live here, to give them the advantages of having people come in. What the impact it's going to, the positive impacts it will make if we bring in 500 people, 5,000 people, and you know, how it can positively change our community. And then I think maybe if people are more aware, they might buy into it, you know, well, and once they know that it's going to benefit us as a whole, as a community, then maybe they wouldn't have so many negative comments. Just a thought.
A great thought. Who agrees with that? Or does anybody think, oh, that might not work? Or who would say, oh, that's a great idea, actually?
I think it's great. And we did a study a while ago, just kind of looking at growth that I don't know off the top of my head, but it'd be kind of interesting to look at and publicize that a little bit more, because I do think people see it as a zero-sum game a lot of times. And it's nice to have them thinking about it growing the pot versus taking my piece.
Yeah. And I like Tara's suggestion that maybe we form a panel of some of the, you know, newer people coming into Great Falls, and again, share that broadly, because Corey, you know, when I heard you speak, and Tara, when you were talking about that, I have not heard it when I've been out in the community, but I see it on Facebook and social media posts, just extremely protectionism. Nobody does want to change. I think we're challenged, and that saddens me, because I lived out in Oregon and Washington for 37 years, and I miss the diversity. I can't tell you, I get so excited when I hear Spanish being spoken in the grocery store. I just want to run over and hug them and thank them and try to speak Spanish like I did when I was there. I mean, it's just, we miss that richness that comes with cultural diversity. But that cultural diversity includes people coming from other states and other communities that have had those experiences. You think about what they talked about in Columbus, Ohio, and having a university of that size and the richness that brings. You know, we probably will not have that large of a university, but I think we really do need to reach out to people and welcome people, because I don't want Corey to leave, and I don't want his family to feel like they're not welcomed, because we need every person here. So Tara, I love the work you're doing. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just add, you know, growing up in Havre in the 70s, my mother was from the South and she married a Montanan. And, you know, it was just like casual conversation around the table. Okay, I'm here now. Let's build a fence around Montana. So I think this goes back generations. So it will be a challenge, but I think it's something that we definitely need to work on as a community.
Yeah, that is what I'm hearing. And we had recognized this in the past. Well, I mean, throughout my time with GFDA, this has come up time and time again, and we haven't put, you know, specific resources towards this. And we want more than anything to partner with other community groups, other organizations to address these problems. Because, I mean, if Brett were on this call, he would say, I know what he would say. He'd say, we only have one person doing talent attraction, and it's me. And we know that in order to address this, it has to be a more community-wide, we have to address it in a more community-wide manner. So while I would love, I want to be a part of this, I'm going to be a part of this, these next steps of what it might look like. Maybe it is a marketing campaign, maybe it is a panel of newcomers. I think these are all great ideas, but we also want to get the community involved as well, because, you know, we can have this conversation all day, but it has to, you know, keep going, I think is what I would need to say. So Corey, do you want to close this out, Corey? Because I want to respect your guys' time. I think we could all sit here and talk for the next, for another hour. I could, because I love talking about this, but it is your Friday. So Corey.
Oh, actually, I just kind of like the fact of the community involvement. And, thinking about the fact that it should be, how do we add to the pot instead of taking it away? I thought that was a really good point. So I know personally, again, I'm just going to draw back to personally because I'm a newcomer here myself, so I can't speak to the history. But personally speaking, there are a lot of things. My family is hugely outdoor focused and food focused. I was in the food and beverage industry for almost 20 years. So with the outdoor focus, bringing the community into going, hey, more guides, whether it's river guides, hunting guides, tour guides, whatever it is, that's businesses that people who have lived here for 35 years may not even know they could own because they know this stuff back of their head. I talk to people who've lived in the area their entire lives, and they know every family over generations. That is a skill that could actually be incorporated and be making money for a community, but it's making them see that, hey, there's something in this for you. Not just, hey, you have to deal with these people coming in and taking up space and renting houses, buying houses, whatever it is. No, we can make it so Montanans make more money. And so that was just kind of the way I was trying to think about how do you convince an entire community of people who have great lives and love everything about their lives that they can actually be improved, not subtracted from.
Absolutely. Again, thank you for that input. I think that's actually a great thing to take away from all of this is how can we show people, like you said, or that has been said, adding, we're adding, not taking away. Having new people here is not going to be detrimental, especially if we keep in mind that, the balance, there's always has to be a balance between keeping that authenticity, but also needing growth, because if we don't have that growth, that authenticity is going to cease to exist because that is just what happens if there's no growth. We'll just keep dwindling in size, which we definitely don't want. We've seen this for the past, I think 50 years. We want to see a little bit of growth. So I think this conversation and the conversations from this that will hopefully happen and keep happening will be that. So with that, I think we'll close. Again, thank you all those of you that could stay on and continue the conversation for, oh my goodness, an extra 17 minutes past the original time we planned. I'll keep that in mind for the next time we have one of these conversations, these community conversations, because I think they're very good and I think great things are going to come from them. So I will be sending an email, a follow-up email with the link to this and then the link to the full video if that's something you would be interested in seeing. But with that, I will say thank you for attending and have a wonderful Friday and a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.